The Erythian Academy stood on the edge of a cliff overlooking a vast expanse of swirling clouds and floating islands, a place where the most talented minds in the galaxy were trained in the arts of navigation, and exploration students from countless species gathered here to learn the secrets of the stars today. However, the Academy was buzzing with anticipation for one of its most prestigious exams, an event that would see the finest young navigators pitted against one another in a test of skill, intellect, and endurance. The exam was known simply as the Sky Maze, a challenge designed to test even the best pilots, and students from hundreds of worlds had failed over the centuries. But this year things were different. This year the competition was fierce, and one particular student stood out among the rest. His name was Jack Anderson, and he was human, the only human in a sea of alien prodigies. And even though he had spent months preparing, there were still whispers behind his back, doubting his ability. His species had never been known for its spacefaring technology or its advanced flight systems, but Jack had something that no one else had: his curiosity and his willingness to push the boundaries of what was possible. The Academy's hallways were filled with nervous chatter as students hurried to gather their equipments, some of them muttering to themselves as they double-checked their ships, while others sat in quiet contemplation, staring out at the ominous sky maze that stretched across the horizon. Jack was no different, though he had a far different plan in mind. His hand rested against the smooth surface of the ship. He had been assigned an advanced alien vessel with holographic controls and quantum navigation systems that could outmaneuver any of the other ships in the race. The ship was designed for speed, precision, and maximum efficiency. But Jack wasn't focused on any of those things. He was focused on something entirely different. His gaze wandered away from the spacecraft and landed on something that made his heart skip a beat. Off to the side was an old-fashioned hot air balloon tethered to the ground. The balloon was a relic of Earth, an invention that Jack knew well from his childhood days, spent watching balloons drift across the sky. The other students didn't even seem to notice it as they scrambled about in preparation for the exam, but Jack saw an opportunity. He hadn't come all this way to play by the rules set by the Academy. No, he had come to show them something that they had never seen before in all the history of the Sky Maze. No one had ever thought to use something as simple as a hot air balloon to navigate the dangerous skies that lay ahead, but Jack wasn't going to let that stop him. He approached the balloon with determination in his eyes. The other students ignored him, but he could already hear their voices in his head, calling him foolish, telling him he was wasting his time. They thought him mad. They thought him weak. But Jack smiled as he climbed into the basket of the balloon, adjusting the ropes and inspecting the burners. If anything, this was his chance to do the impossible, to prove that humans had something to offer that no one else could replicate. His hands worked quickly as he fired up the burners, feeling the balloon gently lift from the ground. The Sky Maze loomed in the distance, but Jack wasn't intimidated. He was ready for whatever came next, no matter how impossible it seemed. Jack stood at the edge of the Academy grounds, feeling the weight of all eyes on him. Though the others pretended to ignore him, he could sense their judgment, their whispers behind his back. Some were too polite to say anything directly, but the dismissive stares, the raised eyebrows, the snickers were enough to tell them what they thought of him, a human taking part in this exam with his primitive Earth skills. No one expected much from him, not with all the brilliant minds from across the galaxy surrounding him. The students were a kaleidoscope of species from every corner of the universe. Some had wings, others had multiple arms or even tentacles, and most of them had been flying ships. For as long as they could remember, their races had mastered the art of space navigation. For centuries, their technology was so far beyond Earth's that Jack felt like a child playing with toys next to the towering figures of his peers. Still, despite the odds, Jack wasn't afraid. He had something they didn't, a kind of determination, born from years of being underestimated back on Earth. Humans were constantly proving themselves against the odds in ways no one expected, and Jack intended to show that same fire today. He didn't belong in their world of shiny ships and advanced tech. He belonged in the sky, and that's where he would prove himself. He glanced around at the others as they boarded their sleek spacecraft, with their sophisticated controls gliding up into the air with perfect precision. One by one, they soared above the clouds without a single mistake, while Jack stood there, with nothing more than an old-fashioned hot air balloon to rely on. The sight of it seemed almost laughable compared to the advanced ships, but Jack didn't care. His hands gripped the ropes tightly, and he adjusted the burner once more, feeling the heat radiate. As the balloon floated slowly upwards, there was something comforting about the simple motion of the balloon, its steady rise and fall with the shifting air currents. It reminded him of Earth, the one place he truly felt at home. As the other students sped off into the maze, Jack took his time, carefully guiding the balloon into the sky, the wind tugging lightly at the balloon's fabric. The higher he went, the more the alien atmosphere pressed against him. The alien sky stretched out before him, an endless sea of floating islands and glowing clouds, yet Jack felt no fear, only a deep sense of calm. The proctors, watching from the ground, exchanged confused glances, murmuring among themselves. They hadn't expected this. No one had expected this. Jack wasn't following the plan, but that was exactly what made him different. While the others were locked into their high-tech ships, Jack embraced the unpredictability of the sky. His balloon drifted gently through the air. It moved not with engines or fuel, but with the invisible forces of the wind, the heat, the cold. He navigated by feel, by instinct, feeling the air currents on his skin and trusting them to guide him forward. His approach was slower, less flashy, but there was a beauty in it. The balloon was like a dancer gliding gracefully through the maze, while the other ships darted back and forth like anxious insects. Jack didn't need to rush. His strategy wasn't about speed, it was about understanding the elements in ways that others couldn't. The sky had always been a mystery to humanity, but Jack was about to prove that it was something his kind could master in their own way. As Jack floated higher into the alien sky, the world below began to shrink until it was nothing more than a blur of colors and shapes. The swirling clouds of the sky maze loomed ahead like a monstrous wall of chaos. No one had ever attempted to cross the maze in such an unconventional way. No one had ever dared to use something as primitive as a hot air balloon to navigate through the dangers that lay ahead. The other students in their advanced ships were already racing ahead, weaving through the shifting islands with impressive precision. But Jack wasn't focused on them. He was focused on the air, the currents, the subtle changes in pressure that only someone with an intimate understanding of flight could feel. He wasn't trying to outrun them. He wasn't trying to show off. He was simply trying to survive the maze. And in that moment, the only thing that mattered was the calm of the balloon and the rhythm of the wind as it lifted him higher. Jack could feel the pull of the sky shifting beneath him, the pressure from the electromagnetic storms swirling in the distance. He could see flashes of light where the other ships were being torn apart by the invisible forces that gripped the sky, but his balloon drifted like a leaf on a breeze, barely disturbed by the chaos around him. He adjusted the burner, and the balloon rose gently, using the warm air to lift him higher above the hazards that the others were struggling to avoid. The students in their ships were panicking, their faces contorted with concentration as they tried to navigate the sudden gusts of wind that threatened to tear them off course. Jack didn't have the luxury of technology to correct his path. He had to rely on something more primal, something more human. He had to trust the air, the only thing he could feel and manipulate with his own hands and instincts. As he passed through an area of the maze filled with floating islands, Jack noticed something that the others didn't see: a faint breeze from the west carrying him in the direction of an open path. While the ship struggled to find the same route, Jack's balloon floated effortlessly towards the gap between two massive rocks. He had a brief moment of doubt, wondering if he was going to get caught in the turbulence that had shredded the ships behind him. But he quickly silenced the fear by focusing on the task at hand, guiding the balloon steadily through the opening. His heart beat faster as he cleared the gap. He glanced back over his shoulder to see a massive electric storm ripping through the sky, swallowing one of the advanced ships whole. It was a terrifying sight, the ship lost in the chaos. But Jack remained steady. He wasn't here to race. He wasn't here to impress anyone. He was here to survive. And in that moment, his strategy was working. He had always known that the key to success in the sky maze wasn't brute force. It wasn't about having the most advanced technology or the fastest ship. It was about understanding the rhythm of the winds, The way they moved in patterns no one else seemed to notice. He had been raised on Earth, where people had been flying hot air balloons for centuries, and the skill was passed down through the generations. Jack's grandfather had taught him how to read the air, how to feel the subtle changes in temperature, how to read the sky like an open book, and now that knowledge was the very thing that kept him alive. While the others were struggling to maintain control, he simply floated onward with the sky as his guide. As the other students fought their way through the chaos of the sky maze, Jack floated calmly higher into the air, his balloon bobbing gently like a boat on a quiet sea. The storm clouds swirled around him, sending violent bursts of energy through the air, but his hot air balloon simply rose and fell with the changing winds. Jack adjusted the burner just enough to maintain his altitude with the smoothness of a seasoned pilot. There was no rush, no frantic panic in his movements. He was completely in tune with the rhythm of the maze and the flow of the sky. The maze was designed to test not only a navigator's skill, but their ability to handle fear, to face the unpredictability of space itself. And while the alien ships tore through the maze at high speeds, their pilots were relying on their technology to get them through the obstacles. But Jack wasn't relying on technology at all. He was relying on something older, something more primal. He was relying on his senses. He noticed how the wind picked up on the left side of the balloon, and he steered gently in that direction, feeling the subtle tug on the ropes, the balloon obeying his will like an extension of himself. As he moved forward, he passed through a narrow gap between two floating islands. The edges of the rocks were sharp, jagged, and imposing, yet Jack guided the balloon through effortlessly, every movement calculated and precise. The ships behind him were barely holding their ground, fighting to keep from being thrown off course by the volatile air currents and electric pulses that sporadically lit up the sky. Some of the ships were caught in the gravitational anomalies and began spiraling into the maze's endless void, but Jack's balloon remained steady, drifting past them. He felt a sense of serenity that none of the other students could experience, not in their sleek machines, their every move dictated by complex controls and artificial intelligence. No, Jack had the simplicity of the balloon, its natural rise and fall guided by the wind itself. He was not at the mercy of technology. He was at one with the sky. And it was a powerful feeling, one that gave him confidence. When the first few electric storms appeared in the distance, Jack didn't panic like the others. He recognized them for what they were: swirling pockets of magnetic interference that could be avoided with careful navigation. He studied the way the clouds moved, the shifts in the air pressure, the electrical surges that sparked across the maze's terrain. He understood these signs in a way that no advanced machine could, not in the same way that sailors of old understood the ocean, or how birds navigated the sky using nothing but their instincts. Jack felt connected to the maze in a way the others could not. He had no high-tech ship to protect him, no complex sensors to warn him when danger was near, but he didn't need them. His eyes, his hands, his heart were enough. As he made his way deeper into the heart of the maze, the dangerous anomalies that had consumed the other ships seemed to pass by him like the ebb and flow of tides. He was moving forward without effort, each breath calmer than the last, his focus sharper with every passing second. Jack's balloon was not a machine, it was an extension of himself, and it was carrying him through the impossible with nothing more than the simple elegance of human ingenuity. The sky maze was growing more treacherous by the minute. The once calm clouds had turned into swirling vortexes of electric energy and gravitational distortions. The islands that floated lazily across the sky had become jagged and unpredictable, their edges shifting as if the very landscape of the maze was alive and breathing. Jack could see the other students struggling, their advanced ships zipping through the air with frantic motions, trying to outpace the dangers of the maze. But no matter how fast they went, no matter how much technology they used, the sky was relentless and unforgiving. Jack's balloon floated steadily above the chaos. Each gust of wind was like a whisper telling him where to go. Each subtle change in temperature was a guidepost in the storm. As the first of the electromagnetic pulses sent several ships into a tailspin, Jack remained calm, guiding his balloon through the turbulent air currents with the ease of a man who had spent a lifetime in the sky. The maze had become a battleground. The ships around him were caught in its grip, fighting to stay on course. While Jack simply drifted with the flow, the air seemed to part for him like an old friend as he passed through the obstacles that had crippled the others, his balloon moving slowly but steadily like a ship on the ocean weaving through the waves of turbulence. While the advanced vessels struggled against them, Jack wasn't in a rush. There was no need for speed. The maze didn't reward speed, it rewarded patience, precision, and most importantly, understanding of the environment around him. And Jack had that in spades. He could feel the way the air was shifting around him, could sense the slightest changes in pressure that others missed. His every movement was deliberate. He didn't rely on sensors or technology. He relied on the whispers of the wind and the deep connection he had forged with the sky itself. Jack had reached the most dangerous part of the maze, a section where the islands were in constant motion, shifting like tectonic plates, each one threatening to collide with the others. The maze seemed to mock him, daring him to make a mistake. But Jack wasn't intimidated. He had seen these kinds of unpredictable movements before back on Earth in his ballooning days. He knew how to read the currents, how to adjust when the air grew turbulent. When the clouds pressed in on him, he understood how to move with the storm rather than against it. He guided the balloon through the narrowest of gaps between the floating islands, feeling the ropes strain slightly as the balloon tilted left and right, each adjustment done with the smallest of movements that no one would have noticed except for Jack himself. Below him, the other ships were beginning to falter, their pilots shouting over their comms as they tried to regain control. But Jack didn't hear them. He wasn't focused on them. He was focused on the air, the ever-changing dance between wind and balloon. Each turn, each rise and fall was like music to him, and he moved in time with it, as if it was his own heartbeat. Slowly but surely he was drawing closer to the final stretch of the maze, a part that no one had ever crossed without losing control of their craft. But Jack wasn't worried. He wasn't following the typical path laid out by the maze. He was taking his own route, the one that felt right, the one that the sky itself was guiding him toward. The other students would never see what he had learned. They would never understand how to move with the wind. Instead of against it, Jack had become a master of the elements. And in this moment, he was not just surviving the maze, he was owning it. The final section of the sky maze was a place of legend. Even the most seasoned pilots feared it. The ancient citadel. In the center of the maze was a floating fortress surrounded by swirling gravity wells that distorted the space around it. Ships that entered the area were often ripped apart or sent spiraling into the void. No one had ever navigated this section successfully without being caught in its powerful gravitational forces. Jack could feel the pull of the citadel. Even before he saw it, the winds shifted violently as he approached the final stretch, his balloon rocking back and forth with the sudden changes in pressure and temperature. His heart raced, but his hands remained steady as he adjusted the burner and lifted the balloon higher above the clouds around him. The other ships were already approaching the citadel, their pilots looking frantic as they struggled to adjust to the erratic gravity shifts and electromagnetic pulses. But Jack wasn't worried. The same calm that had guided him through the rest of the maze remained with him now. This was the part of the test where every other pilot would fall victim to panic. But Jack had already learned something important in the sky maze, something the others didn't understand. It wasn't about speed, it wasn't about fancy technology. It was about trust, trusting the environment around you, and trusting your instincts. Jack didn't need to rely on complex instruments to navigate the citadel. He didn't need to outmaneuver the others. He simply needed to feel the sky and move with it. His balloon drifted gently toward the citadel's gravity, while the other ships around him were shaking in midair. As the citadel's pull grew stronger, their pilots shouting over their comms as they fought to stay in control. But Jack moved slowly and deliberately, allowing the balloon to rise and fall with the shifting currents of air. He could feel the gravitational field surrounding the citadel. It wasn't a sudden shock like the others experienced. It was a gradual force that only those who were in tune with the sky could detect. With each subtle adjustment of the burner, Jack floated higher, just enough to avoid being dragged into the chaos below. The balloon moved like a leaf in the wind. With the slightest movement of his hand, Jack kept it steady. The other pilots were scrambling now. Some of them had already lost control, their ships spinning out of control as they approached the citadel's pull. The once beautiful ships were now wrecks tumbling through the sky. But Jack remained calm. He had no need for speed, no need for frantic maneuvering. All he had to do was stay steady. As he reached the center of the Citadel's gravitational pull, Jack took a deep breath and adjusted the burner one final time, sending the balloon gliding upward just enough to avoid the worst of the pull. He felt the forces shift around him, but the balloon responded with grace, rising smoothly above the tumultuous air beneath it. Jack could feel the finish line approaching. He had only moments left. The remaining students were too caught up in their panic to even notice his approach. They were too distracted by the forces around them to see what Jack had learned to see, how the human had mastered the sky. When the final beacon came into view, Jack released the burner one last time, letting the balloon float gently to the ground below. As he passed the finish line, his heart raced, but there was no triumph, no feeling of victory, only the quiet satisfaction of knowing he had done the impossible. The proctors watched in stunned silence, unsure of what they had just witnessed. Jack had not only survived the most dangerous part of the sky maze, he had done so with a method no one had ever imagined before. As Jack's balloon touched the ground with a soft thud, the other students began to arrive, their ships crashing or spiraling down. One by one, each student that had raced through the maze with their high-tech vessels now struggled to control their ships. The wreckage was scattered across the floating islands like broken toys. The proctors stared at the scene in disbelief. No one had ever expected this. No one had imagined that a human would be the first to conquer the sky maze. But there Jack was standing beside his simple balloon with a calmness that was almost otherworldly. The proctors slowly made their way toward him, their eyes wide with astonishment. Head proctor, an Erythian with silver scales and piercing eyes, approached Jack cautiously. He looked down at the small human who stood proudly beside his balloon, as though it was the most natural thing in the world. His tone was measured as he spoke. "You've completed the sky maze. No one has ever done so with such simplicity. What was your reasoning?" Jack looked up at him and smiled. "I didn't try to fight the maze. I just let it guide me." The proctor raised an eyebrow at the unexpected answer, but said nothing. The other students were now beginning to gather around Jack, their expressions a mix of awe and frustration. Their machines had failed them, but Jack's balloon had carried him through the impossible. There were murmurs among them. Some of them were impressed, others were too proud to admit it, but Jack could feel their eyes on him with a new kind of respect that had been absent before. They had underestimated him, they had laughed at him, they had written him off as an outsider, but now they saw something different in him, something that they couldn't ignore. One by one, they began to approach him, slowly at first, but then with growing enthusiasm. They clapped him on the back and congratulated him, their words laced with disbelief but admiration. Nevertheless, Jack stood tall, his gaze not wavering for a moment as he accepted the congratulations. He hadn't done this for their approval. He hadn't even done it for himself. He had done it because he believed that there was always a way forward, no matter how impossible it seemed. It wasn't the technology that mattered, it was the ability to adapt and trust your instincts, to become one with the environment instead of trying to dominate it. The proctors finally nodded in approval. Though their faces remained neutral, they exchanged a few quiet words before the head proctor turned back to Jack, his voice still calm, but now with a hint of respect. "You've proven something today, something none of us could have predicted. You've shown that even with the most primitive of tools, a human can master the sky maze." Jack shrugged. "It's not about the tools, it's about the mindset. You have to trust the sky." The head proctor stepped back as the other students gathered around Jack, some still in disbelief, others quietly impressed. The academy had expected the impossible, and the impossible had happened. But it wasn't just the human who had completed the maze. It was a message to the galaxy itself that humanity was capable of far more than anyone could have imagined. It was the first time in centuries that the sky maze had been conquered by someone not from the stars, but from a world they had once considered insignificant. Jack had no grand speech, no victory parade. He simply stood in the middle of the wreckage of the other ships, his eyes on the horizon, where the sun was beginning to rise above the floating islands. He had done it. He had proved that even with nothing but an old hot air balloon and his instincts, he could take on the sky. And when humanity had a place in this galaxy, a place where the stars were no longer out of reach, and as Jack looked out over the maze, he knew that this was just the beginning.